So thanks for the introductions. We can all breathe easy now that Larry's introductions are over and settle down into a conversation up here. Listen, I think the fact that this room is full, that it was sold out really early on, is a testament to how important immigration issues are to the people of the United States of America. It has been an important public policy issue throughout our history, but has been elevated over the last couple of decades, and you can see that in a lot of the political debates that have been occasioned by the immigration issue, by how states and local governments have struggled with it in the political sphere during campaigns, how candidates have tried to have a policy forum around immigration on various occasions, but have a stand and really try and set out a set of viewpoints about it. Last year, the United States Senate, and Larry noted this, the United States Senate passed an immigration reform bill. It came on the heels of several states having acted in a variety of ways over the past several years, including Colorado. Many of those actions wound up going to the court system, and some being upheld, and some being struck down. And so the United States Senate took it upon themselves in a bipartisan fashion to pass a comprehensive immigration bill. The United States House of Representatives at the same time passed 5 separate measures out of committees. They were waiting to be heard and still are waiting to be heard. We had, if you looked at the program early on when we announced it, Congressman David Dreyer from California, who we expected to be here and who we hoped would offer a viewpoint really from Republicans in Congress, because it's an important viewpoint in this country. There's been recent activity at the House of Representatives level from the Republican caucus and from Speaker Boehner. The Speaker announced a set of principles that they wanted to negotiate around. Very much those principles were represented by the 5 different bills that had passed out of the House. And then shortly after that, made an announcement as well that they wouldn't take up immigration reform in the House of Representatives until they got to a better place of being able to trust President Obama and believe that the things that were in the Senate bill and in many of the House bills, as they negotiated, believed that the president would do the things that they thought were important to do first and really sort of put on hold the immigration debate in the United States House, and making it difficult, if not impossible, then to negotiate with the senators until they actually have passed either a bill or a variety of bills. Well, we lost Congressman Dreyer because of a canceled flight from LA, and so we don't want that voice to go missing, and I've asked all of the panelists in one way or another to think about what's happening in the House, what's happening in the Republican caucus, and even if you may disagree or may be critical, to talk a little bit about the differences that exist. One of the most significant differences that exist is that there is not in any of the 5 bills a pathway to citizenship for people who are presently in the country in an illegal or an unauthorized fashion. But the Senate bill does have a pathway to citizenship, and so it starts off with a major difference from what's already in the House. And as we said, the Speaker has said just recently, I think it was February the 6th, that there was not going to be negotiations around that bill or a vote on the House floor of any of the immigration bills until they had a greater trust that the President was going to move the agenda on immigration in the way that they saw fit. So with that, I'm going to start with Senator Bennett and just ask you, Michael, if you would kick this off, and we're going to ask everybody to keep their answers kind of short, but kick this off with a discussion about 2 things. One, what you think are the fundamentals in Senate Bill 744, but also, how did you get there? How did you get a bipartisan group of senators to a place where you got a majority vote on this and passed through the United States Senate?
So thank you, Bill, and Larry, thank you very much, and Carol, and everybody for being here tonight, and the other panelists, and for the Attorney General for filling in for David Dreyer. We appreciate that very much.
I appreciate the 2 hours' notice.
What's going to be so let me first observe what you observed, which is the number of people here tonight show you how many people care about this issue from whatever perspective, and it's entirely consistent with my experience traveling the state of Colorado for the last 5 years, I knew about this issue from the standpoint of the kids in the Denver public schools, and I understood the fact that the broken immigration system that we had was having a profound effect on them and on our community as a result. But then when I started to hear from the peach growers in Palisade, I'd hear that they're having a really hard time holding on to their peach orchards, because their family businesses, because of this broken issue. The cattle ranchers on the Eastern Plains, something else. The ski resorts, something else. The high-tech companies in our state. There is not a part of our economy that isn't affected by the broken immigration system that we have, and that's why I was interested in going to work on it. We developed a set of principles that we called the Colorado Compact here in Colorado. I put them in my pocket. I went to the most functional city in the world, Washington, D.C., looking for people that would cooperate or collaborate on getting this done. And I might start there with how did we get it done? Because it might be interesting for people to know here, for example, that the pathway to citizenship was not controversial at all in the Gang of Eight. The 4 Republicans and the 4 Democrats that were part of that from the very outset believed that that was a fundamental part of what we were trying to do, because all of us agreed that we didn't want to have a permanent subclass of people living in the United States of America. We can talk more about that later, and there are other viewpoints on that, but just to give you a sense, the visas for guest workers were much more controversial in the Gang of Eight than was the pathway to citizenship. The way we got there was by having 8 people of goodwill that were actually trying to legislate on behalf of their constituents and on behalf of the country. And everywhere I go in Colorado and everywhere I go across the country, even if I'm in a room full of Democrats only, when people are bemoaning how terrible it is back there and talking about how much we've earned our 9% approval rating, I always say that I hear you, you're right, but listen, the model of legislative leadership that I've seen, or the greatest expression of leadership I've seen in the 4 years that I've been there, was the leadership supplied by John McCain, Marco Rubio, Lindsey Graham, and Jeff Flake, the 4 Republicans who sat at that table for 7 months, knowing what some people in their party were going to say about them, but willing to do it because it's the right thing in their view for the country and for their party secondarily. So having the right partners at the table. This was absolutely the highlight of my time in the Congress, and if we had that level of leadership on all kinds of other issues, we would be just fine as a country. Finally, just the bill itself, if you take time to take a look at it, it starts off with border security. We could talk about what the elements are in there, but they're very, very strong elements on border security. Then there's an earned pathway to citizenship that actually doesn't create what some people call a special pathway to citizenship, but puts people at the end of the line. It's very rigorous. I'm happy to describe the details of that. We also, over time, shift our immigration system from what is sort of known as a family-based system and more toward what we call a merit-based system based on the needs of the U.S. economy going forward, so we don't find ourselves in the position we're in today. And another critical component, and I'll stop here because I'm wearing everybody out, was internal security. That is an e-verify system, so our small business owners, and business owners of any size for that matter, no longer have to be the INS or play a role of trying to decide, who's here legally and who's not here legally. But we create a situation where it's really hard to get a job here if you're not documented. Which is going to, I think, do more to reduce the flow of immigrants, illegal immigrants to the United States than anything else we do in the bill. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thanks. So the House Republicans, prior to Speaker Boehner talking about not wanting to negotiate, they put forth sort of a set of values they want to operate around on their negotiations. And the first was border security and interior enforcement has to come first before you pass comprehensive legislation, including a pathway to citizenship. You have to implement an entry-exit visa tracking system. You need employment verification and workplace enforcement, all before a comprehensive system. You need to reform the legal immigration system internally. We need to really take care of youth that are here and that are either here legally, but the children of illegal immigrants, and we need to view those people that entered illegally as people who are sort of living outside the rule of law and need to be brought in. And this is written down, and this is what they talked about. So, Linda, I know you've been critical of some of the things that have happened recently with the House. But I'd like you to, if you can, just sort of offer a point of view about immigration. And you've written on this extensively, but offer your point of view about why these issues exist, why this isn't a kumbaya moment in Washington, D.C. between the House and the Senate.
Well, you know, it is a little bit frustrating because I, like most Americans, feel very, very strongly that we have to have a secure border. And my concern is more focused on the people who might be coming in to do us harm, the kind of thing that Larry Meisel and the folks at the cell are focused on. I'm worried about drugs that come across the border, and I'm worried about criminal activity that comes across the border. So I believe very strongly in border security. But the fact is, we now spend more on border security than we do on all other law enforcement activities that the federal government does combined. All of them, FBI, Customs, you name it. All of the money put together does not equal what we spend now on border security. Secondly, we actually have a more secure border today than we have certainly any time in my 66-year lifetime. Border crossings are down. Historically, they are at, you know, a 40-year low. I am not a fan of Barack Obama, as anybody who's heard me on Fox News or reads my columns can tell you, but Barack Obama, when it comes to border enforcement, he has deported more people who are here illegally than any president in U.S. history. So I am concerned about border security, but what is frustrating to me is that the single best and most effective way to secure our borders is not to build higher fences, it's not to put more technology out there, it's to create a legal way for people to come. If you want to stop illegal immigration, then what we have to do is pass legal immigration reform that allows the United States to welcome to this country people who are going to take jobs that otherwise would go wanting. And so I think what frustrates me a little with the Republicans is I think they've got their focus on the wrong thing. Let's not even be talking so much about what happens to the 11 million people who are here illegally. That we will have to solve. But the first thing that needs to be solved is we need a way to bring willing workers to the United States. It's good for our economy, it's good for the country, and if we don't do that, we'll never solve the illegal immigration problem.
So let's go north. You know, if you're a consul general, your title is general. If you're an attorney general, your title is general. So we actually have two generals. So I'm going to go by first names if that's okay.
It's like Stratego.
So I'm going to go by first names. And Marcy, a couple questions for you. When I was governor, we actually had members of my cabinet go to Alberta and look at how the provinces handle immigration. And I'd like you to talk a little bit about just how Canada handles immigration issues differently than the United States. And then I'd like you to really give sort of the viewpoint that Ottawa has about immigration reform in the United States. So please start.
Good. Well, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity, Larry and Melanie, to be on the panel this evening. And I'm glad to talk about the northern border. And the northern border has some distinct characteristics from the southern border. And I'm glad to share some of Canada's immigration policies and practices, and perhaps this is an opportunity to share best practices and learn from another, but I can only tell you what's working for our country. So a few examples. First of all, our immigration system almost always has been built around economic immigration. So nearly 65% of immigrants to Canada come for economic purposes, and almost 50% of our new immigrants actually come with post-secondary degrees. And we've set this as a policy objective in order to attract the best and the brightest, and in order to remain competitive in the global competition for talent. And in fact, last week there were some changes that were made to our immigration system, and the minister decided to raise that economic threshold to 70%, the balance going to family reunification and refugee. So when you compare that to the United States, about 75% of U.S. immigration is linked to family reunification, and less than 15% is related to economic. So a big difference there in the type of people that we're trying to encourage to come to Canada. Second part of our strategy, which is relatively new, is that we really see international students as an engine for growth. I mean, we are a small country. We are a population of California spread across a landmass greater than the United States. So we see we need to look outside our borders for population growth. And if we want to compete in the world arena, which reminds me, does anyone have any hockey scores for tonight? Sorry, I digress. It's all about Olympics, not hockey. If we are to compete in the world arena, that we realize that education plays a key role. So the government of Canada actually recently announced that it's going to double its international student body by attracting 445,000 new international students by 2022. And in addition to recruiting more students, and on this topic of pathway to citizenship, in order to prevent brain drain, we are ready, and we will improve our system to allow all international students to be eligible for a 3-year visa immediately upon graduation. That's already in place, and then a pathway to citizenship.
Which is dramatically different than what we do in the United States.
Right,
where
and we also give very
experiences.
generous work permits
Yeah.
for students and their spouses and their families who come to join them in Canada. And finally, a point that Governor, you raised with me when we spoke on the phone. So like in the US, immigration in Canada is a federal responsibility. However, one fact that is unique is that we do delegate some responsibilities to the provinces to manage their local workforce issues, because some of them are very, very different. So British Columbia, for example, needs to recruit creative artists to meet the needs of the digital media industry. So they have a local program where they can attract a certain threshold of those type of artists. Alberta, they are always needing skilled workers in the oil sands, so they manage that separately. Not separately, it's within the system. So our immigration works for us, our system works for us. It has huge public support, double-digit public support, the greatest in probably anywhere around the world. We also, just on the topic of temporary workers, we have a very robust temporary worker program. Someone told me earlier today that they knew somebody, was it you?
Me.
Who got kicked out of Canada after they extended their temporary worker time. But we need those people to fill immediate and urgent needs. We have a very strong agricultural worker program with Mexico where we bring in agricultural workers, and people tend to come and go when they're supposed to.
And it's managed by the provinces.
And that's managed by the province.
Yeah.
And the deportations and the exits are managed by the province. And you know, maybe people don't like working in Alberta in the winter, that's why they leave, but they do all leave.
Can you just talk a little bit about Ottawa and how
Yes.
they view immigration reform?
Yes. So, well, obviously anything that happens in the United States affects Canada. We're a #1 trading partner. We share the world's longest land border, water borders, et cetera. So anything that changes in the U.S. impacts Canada. In the bill that is currently presented in the Senate, there are a few implications for Canada. One of them I wanted to mention was there's no border crossing fees in that bill, which is excellent, because anything that impedes trade between Canada and the U.S. is not good for competitiveness for either country. And that's a $1.7 billion a day border, so that's really important.
How many people come in the United States on a daily basis to work?
300,000 people cross the Canada-U.S. border every single day. So anything that impedes the legitimate movement of people and goods is very detrimental to our relationship. The other thing I wanted to mention is that the border security infrastructure and all the cross-border joint law enforcement initiatives are also something that resonate very well with us. I don't know if you're familiar with the Beyond the Border Action Plan. This is a Canada-U.S. action plan that it's been in place for about 10 years on different names, but it was relaunched by President Obama and Prime Minister Harper in 2011. And we have 4 pillars to this initiative, and it's all about sharing information, cybersecurity, threats, et cetera. And the other thing I wanted to mention was in that bill that I'll be really pissed off if they lose is they increase the number of days that Canadians over 55, and that doesn't apply to me, so snowbirds, it increases the time that they can actually stay in the U.S. without a visa. So I wanted to mention that because my dad's watching tonight from Miami Beach, and he wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, General.